probably got him too late, which is the theory of Jim Heckman and all these kind of human capital education economists. So it kind of makes sense that once you get to a guy like Kevin Munsey, forget it. And by the way, it's really interesting watching it a second time tonight. I'm thinking, I think that kid's, I don't think he could do it. I don't think it's an incentive issue. I think it's an issue. But that's another, which is what makes it so interesting.
They made it from a lobe issue.
I'm
thinking. No, they literally talk about teenagers being able to absorb or not absorb certain kinds of things at a certain stage in their life.
Yeah, and I'm looking at him like, I'm thinking, he gets the incentive. He wants to do it. He cannot do it, which is a whole nother realm that we won't get into. Anyway, Roland Fryer and a bunch of other people, including in New York City, have been trying to pay young kids to incentivize them, all different kind of iterations. Recently they found out it mostly doesn't work, which shocked Levitt, Fryer, shocked there, and it kind of ticked off a bunch of people who gave millions of dollars saying we're going to fix the education problem with money.
And a lot more money. And
there was one project out of all these that worked, which was in Dallas. They were paying kids $2 to read a book. That's all it was. It wasn't about test scores, just to read a book. That one worked. It turned out there was a task that they could do and complete. In other words, it's kind of the difference between being able to do something and complete a task as opposed to better oneself for the incentive, which raises all kinds of interesting questions about intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards and so on. In terms of the names, though, where that began is Roland Fryer and Steve Levitt were looking at black names to see how much of an impediment it is. If you're trying to explain the black-white education, health, income gap in this country, everybody's looking for answers. What's the problem? What's the causes? Roland Fryer is by now kind of the foremost expert on exploring the black-white gap along these various dimensions. They looked at names and want to say, is this a big impediment? Sendel, in the film, Sendel Mullinathon says it's huge. Resumes, we send out this resume study. Roland and Levitt looked at it from a different perspective. They said, let's forget about studies like the resume study, which create this kind of artificial experiment. We're taking a snapshot. Let's look at the whole person's life. If you can measure the impact of a name over the person's whole life, what do you get? And they found out next to nothing, that the name really didn't matter. So what we did for the book was took that names paper, which was an academic paper trying to establish a kind of empirical point about labor outcomes and so on, and pull it apart and just look at the names part of it. And so it was really, the chapter we wrote in the book about names, people either, if you had kids and you were thinking about names, you liked it, and everybody else like, God, why'd you waste 40 pages writing about baby names? This is absurd. I thought what Morgan did with it was brought it to life in just the right way, so that everybody can relate to it, even if you don't have, a dog in the race or a kid in the race.
Question, go ahead.
Yeah,
Can you just get a mic so everyone can hear you? Here we go.
as filmmakers of this particular project, were there any particular instances that changed how, that you learned about, that changed how you went about making films going forward?
you mean our films in our future?
Yeah.
I mean, every film, informs the next one for sure. We'd never done short form, so it was totally new to me. We do feature-length documentaries, and so to be given 20 minutes and try to find some sort of arc was very, very challenging. We had, I guess it was just reaffirmed for me making this film that young kids are some of the best subjects because they are so much more candid than adults in so many ways. And so for me, I still think that when you focus on someone, teenager years or younger, you almost get a pure form of the human being, for better or for worse. And the warts are, evident. It's easy to see the warts. It's easier to see the beauty and the joy and the pleasure of being a human being. So it reminded me again of how much I enjoy filming young people and how they're such different subjects than adults. So I guess that in that sense, it sort of maybe inspired me to, be interested in exploring youth again in future films, I guess.
Yeah, I think just generally, it was, the experience of living with this material for the last couple of years is that it's, I too entered the book before we got involved in the project. The book, it's mind-opening, and it occurs to me when I'm watching Rachel and Heidi's segment, and Levitt asks the question, what if we paid them $50,000? The way that I respond to that, just naturally, is that's preposterous. And it occurs to me how parochial, my thinking is when I'm watching over and over again throughout this, making this film, you know, I would just say that it's challenged the way that I think and opened my mind, you know, as we look for more films to make and subjects and angles on things, kind of the apolitical nature of what they do, I don't know, it's inspiring to me.
I had an odd perspective because I'd committed early, but I wasn't sure if I was going to do a section. And my folks are social scientists, so we talk about this kind of stuff at the dinner table. Growing up, I did anyway. So I had a reverence for the book, didn't want to screw it up. So I was waiting, and I couldn't really start my job until I had a sense of what all the sections were, right, in order to stitch it together. So I was really interested in seeing how each of the directors was going to deal with not screwing up the book, but interpreting the chapters so that it honored what was in the book, but also had the voice of their own style. And I thought, and then I had to try to introduce each of those without stealing the thunder, and also without screwing up the anecdote or the tidbit from the book that I thought best teed up that section. So I was fascinated to see the way they approached it. I was like, how is he going to do Roe versus Wade? No way. It's going to be really hard. And I loved his treatment, and how he did it. It's awesome because it is his voice, but it also honors the book. And anyway, that for me, that was what I think it's going to forever affect the way I approach documentary. Seeing
one of the things you really don't do, which again, I congratulate you for not doing, is be defensive at all. You know, you don't try to, at least I haven't seen any part of it that felt to me like you were trying to address criticisms that Freakonomics has brought on, like reductivism or whether or not there's a certain kind of, you know, academic popularization is always a fragile territory because you're always, you know, going from methodological concerns to, you know, da-da-da-da. And you don't try to do that. You actually address the theory in a way that's really, I think, coherent and serious and, I think, in a way, complicated. You know, it's not trying to dumb it down and speak to an audience, which sometimes is what happens in movies, as we know. Once in a while, just very once in a while, something gets dumbed down.
Well, you're giving me credit for something I had nothing to do with, because they, you know, they did that. But I also find that, you know, we, you know, just by the nature of the material that we write about, and in Super Freakonomics, we found this very much as well. We address global warming. We joked last night. We were joking about making a remake of Inconvenient Truth, and we just have the cherry picker, but it wouldn't go up anywhere near as high as Al Gore's cherry picker went up. But you know, because of the nature of the material that we write about, we get in pissing matches daily. Except we typically don't piss back because, you know, we get to have our say. And I learned this as a journalist. You know, letters to the editor. That section is for the people who cared enough and were angry enough to blow back steam at you. And you know what? They need it. Everybody has that right. I think that's one way in which the digital revolution has upset a lot of people who create stuff in general, whether you're a fashion model, a writer, a filmmaker, whatever, is more people have access to the letters to the editor now. And that noise really shakes up people. And it can be distracting, sure, especially when they're saying stuff that's crazy or wrong or whatever. But I think it's kind of a great piece of this whole process of everybody who makes stuff. Our job is to think and work as hard as we can, and then when we have something to say, we do it as carefully and as well as we can, and then we put it out there. If we screw up, people should be able to say we screw up. If we do it really well and they still shout stuff that we know is nonsense, what can you sit back and say that? So I also feel the number of people who actually care about the pissing match is very, very small. It's usually just the pissers themselves, so, and you kind of don't want to give them the satisfaction of addressing it head on.
Academics have made careers out of this.
If you want to see, like, if you can't get tickets to the heavyweight fight, just go to the University of Chicago Economics Department.
Okay, 2 more questions. Over there on the side.
There's a mic already.
I'm sorry, there's a mic over here. You start and then you're next.
Hi, I really enjoyed your box. Sorry, I have a couple quick leading questions. First is, does Stephen Levitt publish his data and programs for the research? And
Yeah.
the second is, do you think that economists themselves have bad incentives to tell the truth and publish research that's actually wrong? To explain, if you put so much effort into a study and then you analyze the data and you don't show significant results, then that can mean the difference between not having a career or getting a very well-paid career University of Chicago.
Yeah.
So I think that there'd be great incentives to fudge your data.
Yeah, so the answer is, again, I'm not an economist, but I've spent a fair amount of time with him now to understand the way it works. Levitt and pretty much everybody in that realm, on what you do is you have a web page where you have your papers published and then your data is available for download. Because the idea is, economics is a weird science. It's a social science, which is a hybrid. So there's a lot of empirical work in it, but it's also, a social science. And so there's a lot of behavior in it, there's a lot of interpretation in it. So one thing that you need to make very clear is if you put forth an argument, you need to let people have the right to replicate it and to try to test it out in different ways. And his abortion paper with John Donahue has probably been attempted to either debunk or replicate more than any paper in the social sciences in years and years. And mostly, it stood up incredibly well. There was a serious programming error along the way that they then went back and looked at again, Levitt and Donahue, and came out that it didn't affect the result. In terms of the incentives to publish and the incentives to come up with material that shocks people, I think it's a huge issue, and it's a huge problem, and not just in economics, but everywhere. There's an epidemiologist named John Ioannidis, I believe, who's written about how the most, what gets published usually in the sciences is the stuff that is most, kind of toxic in some way or most exciting in some way. It often gets overturned, but the overturn is almost never heard about because it's just the noise makes the noise, and then the ripple kind of doesn't happen. So I think that's a huge issue and a huge problem, and it's up to everybody and anybody, journalists, filmmakers, whatever, to go as deep as they can into it and to be patient. And that's where that's the only time I would argue against the aesthetic of the blogosphere, which mostly I love, is that one piece of currency in the blogosphere is haste, and haste can cause trouble. Whatever kind of research you're doing, whatever kind of reporting you're doing. So the first person out of the gate does have a strong incentive to get there, and if you're wrong, it makes so much noise it can be hard to kind of clean up after.
Hi, I'm Sally from Heidi and Rachel's.
Hey!
Someone's earlier question about how the kids are doing this year. I don't know about Kevin and Urel specifically, but one thing that was really interesting is that even though the program you saw we had very small effects last year, we find that this year, even though the kids no longer have any incentives, the kids who we offered the incentives to last year are still doing better than the kids who didn't get incentives, and actually the effect seems to be growing. So it looks like something we did last year maybe got them into the habit of becoming better students, and something has stuck with them that has lasted. Sort of what Urel was saying, oh, see me next year when I get a fresh start, I get to start over, I have this new attitude towards school. So we're going to keep following them, and we'll write it up and see what happens. As Heidi knows, I was saying all along, this is my thesis, this is what I'm going to get a job based on. So I did have a strong interest in it working, but it's hard to lie about experimental data because you've got the treatment kids, you've got the control kids, and they do what they do, and no matter how much you call and beg them to get their grades up, there's not much you can do to change the data. So I think people are interested in the result either way, so we'll just tell it how it is. And
Sally, do you think the finding is that the best way to bring up grades in the long run is to bring a documentary film crew into every class?
Well, I was at the party last night, and a lot of people were coming up to me and saying, I don't think it's the money, I think it's you, standing out there. And
No, but cheerleading does matter.
we do look at that, and this year we're trying to separate the effect of mentoring alone versus money
Have the
alone.
boys seen their segment?
Not
What?
yet.
Have the boys seen the segment of their film?
Not yet. I can't wait to show it to them.
Yeah, no, that'll be really.
You
Your
think
reels
they'll be-
Chicago Heights are very excited about it. So
You think they'll be okay?
I was texting them last night to say who from Chicago Heights made it in, and everyone was very excited to hear about it. So hopefully we can show it in the community. We are starting that preschool in August, so we really will start with young kids and follow them until they're through high school to see, if you catch kids really early on and catch their parents really early on and try to make those changes, does that affect their life?
That would be a
age
good
20?
film. You should let us follow it.
Exactly. I'm accepting offers.
It's really rare to have intelligence in American popular culture. It's even rarer to have any kind of intellectual culture become part of the popular conversation. You guys have really started something great. Thank you so much for being here.